Welcome, everyone, to QuickBooks Online tips and tricks for small business owners and their bookkeepers. This is Hector Garcia. Today is September 1st, 2021. And the reason why I say the date, because this stuff kind of goes on YouTube afterwards, is because sometimes features change and it's valuable to kind of get the context in terms of, what possibly could change in the future if you're watching this later on. A little bit about me. I'm a QuickBooks Pro advisor. I'm a member of the Ambassador and Trader Writer Network. I'm also a reseller for QuickBooks. If you want to learn how to become a reseller like me, just email me and I'll explain to you how you can sell or resell QuickBooks products. If you look up my name in YouTube, you get to my YouTube channel. You can see tons of content in there. I have a guest host. We have Kate from Bookkeeping Side Hustle Facebook group. If you are not already a member of her Facebook group, I recommend that you go into Facebook, search for Bookkeeping Side Hustle. Join that group if you are a bookkeeper and accountant and are looking for a support group of fellow bookkeeper and accountants trying to grow from side hustle into full bookkeeping practice. That's a great group to join. Kate, you want to add something or should we jump on?
Well, the most important thing on there is that I'm one of your number one tutorial watchers. You're kind of how I whenever I have a problem, I put in your name, I go to your YouTube channel, I try to find my solution, and I don't think you've ever let me down. So right. I think
I'll take the free advertising anytime. So thank you for that.
Well, since folks in my group are listening, I want to make sure that they know that's like a very valid way to learn. I mean, I think everyone uses YouTube now for learning. So, and Hector's one of the best instructors. So I legitimately stream his stuff often.
Thank you, Kate. There's a couple more slides in there you can check out that talks about content and subscribing to my YouTube channel and my premium content. Well, I'll skip that and let's go straight right into it. So we're going to do a quick feature comparison across multiple versions of QuickBooks. We're not going to compare all the features. We're just going to talk about within the context of today's webinar, just because many times I'm showing something and people are like, oh, my QuickBooks doesn't have that. Well, that's probably because you don't have the right version. And that's a really important point. So we're going to talk about the things that we're going to talk about within the context of the versions of QuickBooks. We'll cover that. Then we'll talk about bank categorization tips. I'm going to show you a couple of tips that will really speed up your process, whether you're a small business owner, a bookkeeper, an accountant, an advanced user, or basic user. I think you will appreciate those. Then we're going to get a little bit more advanced, talk about custom reports. We'll talk about tags, classes, locations, which are the main dimensions of data that QuickBooks has for us to make changes to to add additional dynamic information for reporting purposes. Then we're going to talk about custom fields and building custom reports with custom fields. That's going to be an advanced QuickBooks Online Advanced only endeavor. Then we're going to talk about custom graphs and custom dashboards. Again, only QuickBooks Online Advanced.
Fantastic.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to quickly talk about, today we're going to talk about user permissions. We're going to talk about tags. We're going to talk about bank feeds. We're going to talk about classes, locations. We're going to talk about custom fields, custom report builder, and custom graphs. These are not the only features that get compared across all versions of QuickBooks. If you actually click on the link that's in the slides, you get to what I call a BAS, a big ass spreadsheet that I built over a period of time. There's probably about 200 lines of data.
Oh my goodness.
On this BAS. And that's me comparing every feature in QuickBooks, Simple Start, Essentials, Plus, Advanced, Enterprise, Pro, Premier, all the different versions across the board. So this is a handful. It's quite intimidating for a beginning user. But if you kind of want to see if a particular feature is available in one version and not the other version, that's in here. Now, this spreadsheet only includes comparable features. So for example, they all do invoices. So there's no line that says invoice and yes across the board. So only the ones that one version might have it and the other version might not. So that spreadsheet, it's available to you. It's been partially crowdsourced. That means often I go to my community, my Facebook group, and I request for them to add more things to it if I miss them. But 90 to 95% of it, it's catered by me and it continuously gets updated by me just because I find that to be a really useful piece of information. So again, what you're seeing on the screen now It's only within the context of today's topics, just so you can kind of get an idea. Once we get to classes and locations, we're talking about plus and advanced only. Once we get to custom fields and custom report builder, we're talking about 100% QuickBooks Online Advanced. And for some context, you got the different prices, right? So if you got yourself, you got QuickBooks and you can't afford more tthan $50 a month for the software, you can learn about the advanced and the plus stuff, but it's something that you will never have access to, right? So you got to understand that QuickBooks adds the cream of the cream better features to the higher versions of their software, because that's how they can charge more, right? So that's just a quick summary to that. So I have a couple of slides there. If you are a small business owner and you want to get a 12-month discount on QuickBooks Online, there's a link for that. That's my affiliate link. I do get paid for that, but that deal that you get through this link, it's better than any other deal if you buy through Intuit directly. If you need to upgrade to advanced, I can extend you a 50% discount for 3 months. This is for existing accounts. Just email me and we'll make that happen. If you need to add payroll, I can also give you 30 to 50% discount for 6 months, depending on the version. You will email me to make that happen. These are my reseller activities. This is how I make money as a content creator. I resell the software. So again, if you're a bookkeeper and accountant yourself and you want to know, hey, I want to offer these discounts to my clients, I want to get paid in the back for offering or recommending QuickBooks, just email me. I'll explain to you how that works. But if you're a small business owner trying to get QuickBooks upgrade or payroll or whatever, you email me and I'll take care of you. So that's the infomercial part. That's how we pay for this webinar content. Let's talk about user permissions. Now, the single most important thing about thinking about upgrading to Essentials or to Plus or to Advanced is to think that QuickBooks gives you additional users. So Simple Start gives you 1 user, Essentials 3 users, Plus 5 users, Advanced 25 users. Now that's up to, you don't have to have all the users. I have a lot of advanced clients. I have 3 users. You're not forced to have that many users. That's how many users are included with the package. I guess that's the best way to frame it. If you're working with Essentials or Plus, which gives you 3 or 5 users, you do have some basic customizability on what that user can access. You can either give them all access except for payroll. You can give them all access with payroll, or you can give them limited access of only customers or only vendors. So that's basically the difference. And the slides give you sort of the cheat sheet, the list of things that would be included depending on which user permission you choose. So that's when you have Essentials or Plus, very basic user customizability. Okay. There's also a non-access, which basically means the user can log in and add a timesheet, right? They can add their timesheet and get out. That's all they can do. Just submit a timesheet. Now, if you're working with QuickBooks Plus or Advanced, you get the additional unlimited report only users and unlimited time tracking only users. So if you got, let's say 10 employees and you're running payroll and QuickBooks Online Plus only gives you 5 accounting users, you can have 5 accounting users plus all 10 of your employees logging in and doing their time tracking. Okay. So that's only with Plus and Advanced that you get the unlimited reports only users and time tracking users. Now with Advanced, they got something called roles, where they split QuickBooks into pretty much 7 categories: sales, expenses, banking, inventory, workers, reports, and management. You don't see the last one there called management. And it lets you choose what type of access that user can have. So they can have view only access, create access, delete access. This is still sort of beta. They're still kind of working on tweaking these things out. But for now, you have access to all the different areas as the roles. And you can pick and choose what the user can choose. They also added, which is pretty cool, is if you have locations turned on in QuickBooks, you can have a user only be able to create invoices for that location, right? So that's really interesting. If you got like a field rep that only works in store B and you don't want them to create invoices for store A, you can limit them to only be able to do that sort of thing. That's going to be only in advance. That's why you pay the big bucks to have that additional flexibility or that additional access. Kate, do you have a question or comment to that?
Not yet. I'm writing some down.
All right, cool. All right. So we're going to go to bank categorization tips. So we're going to finally go into the product and learn something new about QuickBooks and get off the slides. I know slides are boring, but sometimes we need them to organize our thoughts and kind of let us know where we are in the process. So I got QuickBooks Online open. We're going to start with QuickBooks Online banking tips. So if you've never done QuickBooks Online Banking, some of these things are going to go over your head. I'm just going to assume that you've done it before. And I'm going to show you some of the little gotchas and little things that are inside of it that I think will be valuable for you to know if you have not explored them. So I'm going to click on transactions and then banking. If you're logged in as an accountant, that might say banking instead of transactions. So the wording is a little bit different depending on who the user is. So I have here my American Express Amazon business card that I downloaded, and there's a whole bunch of transactions here. The most important thing is for some people, the payee column is by default turned off. So what happens is I'm going to click on the gear menu on the top right here, and I'm going to turn off the payee. So what happens is when you don't see the payee column, and this is especially true for users that are starting up, maybe they haven't seen my video where I say, don't do this in QuickBooks, where I specifically talk about not doing this particular thing, which is omitting the payee information. Now, naturally, if you're looking at this, and I'm going to collapse the left navigation bar. If you're looking at this, that description looks great. I'm just going to sort this to get maybe something more recent that I would remember. But you see those descriptions and you're like, great. All the information I need to understand what that transaction is sitting there in the description. That means I don't need to do additional work like create the payee, create a vendor, or select a payee. So it is natural for someone to look at this just like that and maybe select the category. Let's assume that's the correct category, advertising and marketing, and then click on confirm and move on. The problem with doing that is you're entering the transaction without a payee, without a vendor name. So that means that if you do that, you'll be locked out of being able to create the best report in the world, which is expenses by vendor report. This is the single-handedly most valuable report that accountants and bookkeepers have to analyze with their client where the money is being spent, if things are being categorized correctly. Are there any patterns in spending where maybe you're spending way too much in vendor A or vendor B? And then sort of realizing, hey, someone's stealing from you potentially. So not having the vendor name takes away the capacity to sort and group the expenses by that payee. So what I mean by having the vendor name, I'm going to click on the gear menu again, is to enable that payee field, have it there front and center, have it there be blank. And at this point, every single person watching this webinar, a blank payee should give you convulsions. So a blank payee should make you feel so sick and strange that you're not going to hit confirm without putting a payee in there. It's a capital sin in my world to enter a transaction without a payee. Again, because I want to be able to get my expenses by vendor report in the future. Now, the unfortunate thing, and I'm just setting this whole thing up, the unfortunate thing is I have to click on the transaction. I have to click on the drop-down menu next to vendor, and I have to go search for that vendor in my vendor list. So that's a lot of extra steps. Skipping the payee is so much faster than entering the payee in there, but that needs to happen. You got to enter the payee in there, and then you can select the right category and then click on confirm. Now, one thing that's really important, you're going to see a memo line, which is basically a blank box with a bunch of type in there. You could take information from here, copy it, and let's just assume that the payee is blank, and you can paste it in there, and then you can hit tab on the keyboard so it accepts it as a new vendor, hit tab, and hit enter, and then it saves it for you. So a little bit of a shortcut to create a new vendor, copy and paste from the memo, hit tab, enter, and I will save it and create it as a vendor. Luckily, QuickBooks knows that the context is an expense and it selects vendor, not customer, to create that in there. So that's one little tiny tip to give you. Now, the other thing is, in order for this stuff to show up in the memo here, and that's a really important piece too, is here in the gear menu, you have to make sure that copy bank detail to memo is turned on. Back in the day when this wasn't turned on, what happens is nothing comes into the memo. And if you do, in fact, forget to put a payee or a vendor in there, this information down here does not show up in reports. It shows up on this screen, the bank detail screen, for you to use. But the minute you save it, it no longer shows up in reports. So if you want the original text from the bank, which gives you the most amount of potential context to realize whether or not you're categorizing something correctly, you want to make sure that that information is being pushed in there. So for that, we're going to click on the gear menu and click on copy bank details to memo. Make sure that that little checkbox is turned on. That way that information gets copied on. For most of you, that's checked on by default. You don't have to worry about it. It's just there. But if you're noticing that these memos are not coming in, that's what's happening. That little checkbox is not there. So I'm going to click on confirm. That's done. That transaction goes in there. If Google shows up again, in theory, QuickBooks should pick it up and pick up the vendor name. In some cases, it will. In some cases, it won't. You might need to create the rule itself for it to pick it up. This is a good example. We see it, the transaction show up again. It did not pick it up. It should pick it up, but it did not pick it up. Now, there could be multiple reasons for that. Here in the gear menu, there's something called enable suggested categorization. Sometimes when you turn that on, QuickBooks will read the payee on it. Let's see if it does it now. It's not a perfect science sometimes. And if it doesn't, again, your second choice here would be to create the actual rule. So we'll do that real quick. Here where it says vendor customer, I'm going to search for Google again. I'm going to select the vendor name. And notice, and it's a really neat thing, notice that the minute you select the vendor name here, a new option shows up in the bottom that says categorization history. This was added recently, summer of 2021. When you click on categorization history, you see this drawer showed up on the side, giving you a history of all the transactions that you've done in the last 12 months using that vendor. And knowing how you categorize something in the past gives you context for potentially categorizing something now. It doesn't mean it's correct. It just means that you've done this before like this. So if you've done the research already in the past to figure out what it is, this will give you a quick cheat sheet letting you know, hey, this is happening, right? We use that category. So I'll give you an example to that. I'm going to step out for a minute and I'm going to use a different category for this. I'm going to call this, let's say, business licenses. And then I'm going to click on confirm. So what happens if I do that and then Google Ads shows up again? Notice that now it picked it up. So now it's picking up the vendor. Now it noticed it. So now I don't have to select it from the drop-down menu. It's actually suggesting it for you. The reason why it's suggesting that for you is because we have turned on enable suggested categorization. If I check that off, then it won't suggest that category and that payee. So now you kind of understand what that little checkbox is for. So by turning that off, you have to select it each time, or you have to create a rule for it to go through the rule process. Now, if you remember, I did one category as advertising, one as business licenses. QuickBooks Online Banking will always pick up the last thing that you did. So if I click on categorization history, I can now see, look, on 8/31, I used it as advertising. On 8/25, I used it as business license. I can open the details of one if maybe there's some additional context in that memo, some additional meat there for me to figure out what that is, then maybe that could be helpful. And what's really, really cool, I can just select the one I used in the past and click on assign category. And basically that means mimic the last thing that I did. Okay. Now, if you don't want to be choosing that every single time, then you basically just create the rule. You click here where it says create rule and say, you know what? Stop asking me about what Google is, right? I'm just going to call this Google. And I'm going to tell it, yes, it's going to be advertising. Yes, it's going to be this vendor name. Here in the memo, I usually just delete what's in the memo because I don't want to add an existing memo from an existing transaction to future transactions. That's really important. So when you save, when you save something from a rule, make sure you delete that memo. That way it's not adding the memo from the other transaction and confusing the heck out of everybody. Okay. So I'm going to click on save. And now it's a rule. So once it is a rule, I should no longer be questioning it. QuickBooks will be doing that categorization for me. I don't know if I have any other Googles here that I can show as an example. Seems bad luck that those are my only Google transactions. But if you see that Google show up again, it will be automatically assigned to that payee and the category, and you shouldn't second guess it and just kind of confirm it from there. Okay. Now, one of the common questions. Yeah, go ahead.
I always change the description to I change it to bank text and I shorten like when you made that rule, you left the whole bank text whole description.
So great. Yeah, we I don't want to get deep into banking just because it's like an entire rabbit hole, but you're making a really good point that I'm skipping through a really important piece, which is when you create a rule. I'm going to go back and edit that rule. There's a couple of things that you have to think about. Like number one, this transaction has a whole bunch of numbers in it. What's the probability that this number will show up again?
Right.
You know, exactly like that. So if you want to, and if it doesn't show up again, that could happen. So usually what you might want to do this is just maybe delete what's there and just type Google or Google Ads or something that would be like the main thing that you wanted to search. And then here on description, you want to use bank text. So it searches inside the memo and not inside of what I called the smart payee. And that's a made up term from my perspective. I'm going to discuss smart payee in a second. That's a thing that QuickBooks does that, again, I'm giving it a name. I don't know what the real official name is. I'll explain in a second what that means. But description means read from QuickBooks's perspective of what the payee is. So it's sort of like AI, let's call it that. And bank text means, no. I need you to actually read the memo and capture it from the memo. So that's what she says. She says, don't do description because it works half the time. Use bank text. That way you have a little bit more control over what that rule could be. I do have a video where I explain bank rules in detail. I have a slide at the end that kind of goes over bank rules. So you can go back and watch that video. It's like an hour and a half long video. It's pretty detailed. Again, we can get into the weeds of banking big time, but I think it's valuable that she pointed out, hey, you're missing over something that could confuse someone. Okay. So what you're seeing now is what you're seeing right now is called the bank text, right? All these text that you see here is called the bank text. So bank text is when I click on the gear menu, there's a little checkbox that says show bank details. You can call it bank text. You can call it bank details. For the context of bank rules, bank details, memo, and bank text are all the same concept. Why in the world did Intuit decide not to call it show memo, and memo? Who in the world knows? But this is the terminology that is decided to use to talk about the exact same thing. So this show bank text means actually show me the stuff that came from the bank here where it says description. If I uncheck that, what QuickBooks is going to do is it's going to clean out the description section and do what I call smart payee. I don't even know what the right term is, which is QuickBooks trying to guess a simple version of that text for it to be easier for you to read. So you're not tired reading a bunch of symbols and hopefully categorize things correctly. The problem is many times that's wrong. Okay. So a great example here is take a look at this one. Okay. So this is my credit. This is my Amex. Okay. And Amex, when you download the transaction, it brings in the name of the user in the line. So my name is Hector M. Garcia. So what you're actually seeing here is you're seeing a vendor name that contains my name as well. I'm going to collapse the left navigation bar here. So take a look at this. So we have TST, which means toast. That's a POS system. Mitch's S West Side. That's a bagel place, by the way, in Weston where I live. And then my name, I'm the user. So then what QuickBooks is trying to do is they're trying to say, you know what? You're kind of dumb to like figure things out on your own. I'm going to like really make this dumb it down for you to make it easier for you. The problem is that it's wrong because it's AI. It's a computer guessing. So if I uncheck show bank details, it says Hector M, which has nothing to do with the bagel place I went to, right? So that's one of my pet peeves with this being the default way that QuickBooks shows the information, just because it's, in my opinion, ultra confusing. Okay. So that being said, the whole thing is a setup for, all right. So knowing that there's sometimes the cleaned up version is good, that sometimes it's not, is there a fast way to create these vendors that are accurate? So I don't have to create a vendor each time. Again, it's a pain in the butt to select the transaction, type the vendor name here, create the vendor, click add, click save. I mean, I recognize that it does take a long time to go through that. Okay, so if you want to save time, best thing you can do is upload the vendor list in QuickBooks using the information that's in this screen. What do I mean by that? So I'm going to click on the gear menu here, and I'm going to click on page size here in the bottom and do 300. That way I can see as many transactions as possible. Then I'm going to export. Let me collapse the left navigation bar a little bit and zoom out so I got a little bit more real estate so you can see the whole screen. I'm going to export this as a spreadsheet. So I'm going to click on the export to Excel button that's in between the print button and the gear menu. I'm going to open that up in Excel and basically have a list of all the transactions with the smart payee. We got the smart payee. Okay. Then I'm going to delete payee, class, and amount. I don't need that. And I'm going to leave assigned to just to kind of get an idea for what QuickBooks is suggesting, although that could also always be 100% wrong. So, take it with a grain of salt. Maybe you should delete it because it's way too confusing, but that's okay. Leave it there. And I'm going to call this smart payee or AI payee or whatever. So I know that at this point, this is, in some cases, QuickBooks is cleaning up the vendors for me. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the same spreadsheet. I'm going to switch this to show bank details. That way I get to see the entire piece of information. Then I'm going to export that to Excel as well. Okay. You might already be seeing, okay, I kind of see where you're going with this. So what I'll do is I'll take and copy and paste my full description, right? This is the full description that comes from the credit card company. So I'm going to copy and paste that. And I'm going to do it right here alongside of the smart payee. Okay. I'll just delete assigned to for now. Okay. So that gives you a general idea for, okay, what is the stuff that I'm looking at? It's basically the same exact set of transactions. Whoops, I copy and pasted it wrong. Let me just copy and paste one more time. So it's aligned. This needs to be aligned. Okay, there we go. So now we get to see the actual vendor name or the entire description. And then we see the one that's cleaned up. So by doing this, then I can create my own vendor list that I'm going to import into QuickBooks. That way, my workflow of categorizing transactions is not slowed down by having to stop and create a vendor each time. Okay. So I'm going to select all these columns here. And unfortunately, this turned all of a sudden into an Excel class. I don't want to do that. I know that for some people, Excel is like, oh God, really? I get it. Okay. But again, the point here is that we're going to bring all the vendor names quicker to save some time. So once again, sometimes we're going to be happy with whatever they gave us. Sometimes we're not. So in this particular case, I want to put Mitch's West Side. So I'm going to copy this and then paste it in here. In this case, I want VeraSage, whatever that is. Okay, copy and paste that here. I'm good with these three. Then this one's an automatic payment. I don't have to do much with that. I'm just going to leave it an automatic payment. Then this one, I'm going to clean it up manually. Okay, do that. And then this one is going to be Beeper MD. That was an in-home COVID test. Pretty cool. That's shareholder distribution. That's not a business expense. I used a business credit card for it, but I categorize that as a business expense. Then
you have one on row 8 of yourself.
Yeah. So we got Food Hall here. And we have Lucille's American Sea, whatever that is. Okay. Copy that and paste. Okay. So again, so that's kind of the concept. Some of them are going to be good. Like this Walgreens is good. This Microsoft is good. This MMA kiosk might not be good, but maybe I can delete some of it. Okay. So that's kind of the point. The point is it's going to be hit and miss. They're going to give you accuracy, maybe 80%, 90%. I've seen some credit cards where it's 100%. Like Chase, for example. Chase doesn't bring my name into the transactions. So because of that, it will never confuse QuickBooks thinking that the vendor name is Hector. So it really does depend on the credit card company and how they bring that information there. Okay. So for the purposes of just kind of moving on, just imagine now that essentially I have my list of all my payees that were used across all the transactions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take this whole data file and I'm going to remove duplicates. So I tell it to remove the duplicates of B, click OK. And then I no longer need the additional description and essentially have an Excel file with a whole bunch. Again, just imagine that we cleaned up the rest of them and imagine they're all down to like a concise list of 80, 90 vendors that you're downloading from 12 months worth of transactions or whatever. And then we're going to come in and we're going to create all these vendors in QuickBooks easily. All I need to do is I can delete the date as well. I just need a flat spreadsheet with all my payee names. I'm going to go to the file menu, click on Save As. I'm on a Mac, but a PC should be similar. Save that as a CSV file, and that's done. So basically, I got a spreadsheet of a bunch of payees, which I saved and I removed the duplicates. Then I can stay on my banking screen. I don't have to leave my banking screen per se. I can leave it there. I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate the tab here in the top. So I'm going to open up a different tab over in QuickBooks. And now I'm going to click on the gear menu. And in the gear menu, there should be an option for import data. And then inside import data, there should be an option for vendors. Again, why am I doing this? Because I don't want to create the vendor manually in bank feeds. Maybe I have, hundreds and hundreds of transactions that I'm trying to fix or whatever. And I don't want to get stopped to create the vendor each time. Okay. So I used the wrong file there. Let's go to browse here and pick the other one. I think it was this one. Click on next. Then it says which field has the vendor in it. Maybe I didn't save it. It's fine. We'll leave it like that. And then I'm going to click on next. And then it's going to give me the list of all my cleaned up payees. I don't need that second column. I want to make sure that this second column is not being used. It's only the name. Then I'm going to click on next. I do have a video on this in YouTube, but you can just kind of slow down and pause and see it by itself. If there's any duplicate vendors, it will not create duplicate vendors. As a matter of fact, look right here. It says all of these are duplicated. We're not going to create those. So it's not going to create duplicate vendors. If there's slightly different vendors, like if you have Amazon Marketplace and Amazon, QuickBooks doesn't assume that Amazon Marketplace and Amazon are the same thing, or the McDonald's 325 and McDonald's 5557 are the same thing. No, that's different vendors. So it's only when they're identical that it won't repeat. Now, what's nice about that is once you do that, then I'm going to refresh my banking screen because my payee database, it's already in there. And again, you do have to kind of imagine that we clean them up and we clean them up nicely. And then you will notice that the vendors now automatically get added into my banking. So now I don't have to sit there and create the vendor for each transaction. So that stuff, again, it feels like a really long setup to export into Excel and clean them up. And why are you doing that? It seems like, why am I working outside of QuickBooks? Well, now I got payees already entered in there. It's saving me a whole step of selecting a payee. Now I only really need to worry about picking the right category. Okay. So that's going to speed you up in ways that you have no idea. Okay. Now that's particularly more useful when you're doing a lot of data import, like if you're doing 3 months at a time, 4 months at a time. If you're doing weekly and you only got 10 transactions in there, that's probably not going to save you time just because there's not enough information of those 10 lines to kind of create predictive behaviors of the future. But if you go back 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, 12 months, and you do that, that's going to save you so much time. It's not even funny. One of the other options could be is you can go into the bank, download this bank statement as Excel or CSV, also clean it up from the Excel you downloaded in the bank and upload that vendor list preemptively. Okay, so you can go either way with that. But that's just an example, and I really would recommend that you look at this and experiment with different versions. Generally, when you're doing this for the first time, I wouldn't do it in a live file. Create a free trial, connect the bank, connect the credit card. Just give it a shot, because once you upload a vendor list, you can't easily delete it. You got to sit there and delete it one by one. And if you upload it as a customer list instead of a vendor list, that's going to be chaotic, right? So yes, I'm recommending you to do this. Yes, I'm in record doing it and saying you should do it too. But I'm also in record saying test it first on your own, on a sample file, before you kind of get trigger happy with importing 1,000 vendors into your database. All right. So Kate, I'll let you transition on that. We'll move on from banking. Payee grouping. I'm going to show you this real quick just because it's worth mentioning it, even though I wanted to move away from banking. So once you have all the transactions in there and the payees are now selected, so where QuickBooks detects the payee, again, we have to enable the payee column, and QuickBooks now detects it because they've been imported, they've been cleaned up, because it matches it based on the name, whatever it happens to be. There's a really cool option here in the gear menu called turn on grouping. And grouping will group any of the columns that you have sorted by. So if I have it sorted by date, it will group it by date. So in this case, it will do it by month. But if I sort it by description, now it will group it by whatever description was downloaded from the bank originally. Okay, so whatever description was downloaded from the bank originally, you see it in there. If there's a missing payee, it literally creates a group for missing payees. You see how it groups it? Or you can group it by the cleaned up payee or the imported payee. And again, it puts them all together in the same transaction. That might give you context, right? So when you're categorizing stuff by seeing everything you spent with that vendor, that may lead you to believe, you know what? That's a monthly payment for a loan instead of thinking that's an office supply. Like Best Buy, typical example. You see Best Buy for $150 in your bank statement, you're automatically going to assume that's office supplies, something like that, right? Equipment. But if you go see 6 months worth and all the Best Buys are fixed $150 a month, well, you know that's not a single month, a single expenditure. That's a monthly payment, right? And a monthly payment is probably Best Buy credit card, not Best Buy the store. Same thing with Home Depot. You see Home Depot for $320 and you're like, okay, that's materials. But then you see $320 per month. Okay, that's a loan you got to the Home Depot credit card. So sometimes the context of seeing multiple transactions on the same vendor. And again, you might need to clean up that vendor list first and have QuickBooks detect the vendor list before you can even group them in this particular way, shape, or form. So that was a vendor grouping. And I think it just kind of fits nicely into the narrative of having the payees being detected by QuickBooks.
I got a question.
Yep.
So I thought when I saw payee grouping on here that you were going to talk about something different. My question is, so that very first toast vendor, it was like West Side Bagels or something like that.
Yeah.
And you created the vendor as West Side.
Right.
And I was wanting you to comment on whether is that really how you do it? Or are there some that you would think this is a one-off expense and we're fine with having it be categorized to hotels or restaurants?
Don't get me started on that. Okay.
Oh, okay.
I will never have my clients file with a vendor called restaurants or a vendor called airlines or a vendor called hotels. That is one of my biggest pet peeves.
Okay.
That bookkeepers do. It might save them money. I'm sorry, not money. It might save them time to select restaurants instead of creating the vendor. But then when I run my report by vendors, I don't get the context anymore. Remember, ultimately what I want, and this is, you got to understand the why and the logic behind this. Ultimately what I want is I want to run a report that says, I'm going to come in here and go into, let me search it here, is expenses by vendor summary. Ultimately, I want to run this report. And I need to see my expenses by vendor. If I see a category here called restaurants and it's a really big number, I don't see a vendor name, that might be fudged. Okay, that might be like shortcut in there, right? So I'm gonna have to go in there, look at the transaction and look at the memos now to kind of see, okay, are these all restaurants? So it just makes me feel more work for me to have vendor names out of either laziness from the data entry person or insightfulness, quote unquote, from the data entry person, thinking it's going to be better and less cluttered to have less payees. So it could be both sides. Some people might just be straight up lazy and say, nah, screw it. I don't want to create every payee name for a restaurant. Or somebody might say, no, I don't want my vendor list to be cluttered. And I want it to be more pleasant experience for everybody to have a shorter vendor list. So you might be doing it for the wrong reasons or for the right reasons. In both cases, they're wrong. You should have the vendor, the payee in there. Now, if QuickBooks had a limitation of how many vendors you can have, if QuickBooks didn't have a search option, if QuickBooks didn't have a filtering a mechanism, then I would get it, but that's not the case. QuickBooks allows you to put unlimited vendors. You can quickly search and sort stuff. It's really easy to find. And most customers are not sorting through the vendor list anyway. Most small business owners don't really feel vendor lists can be cluttered. Customer list, yes. A customer list should never be cluttered, but I don't care about having a lot of vendors in there. I never seen a negative side of that. Only possible in the report.
Every client of mine, I have a restaurant category. So I guess I need to go fix that.
A restaurant vendor name.
I have a restaurant vendor name. I do because it's like coffee here or quick lunch there or something.
But look, this is what happens, Kate. Let's say you're sitting down with, let's say a client says, I need help, right? They need your help as a consultant, as an accountant, as a human being, as a third party giving opinion on their business. And if you go there and say you spend a lot of money in restaurants, just say that. You spend a lot of money in restaurants, that is so generic. That's like, okay, well, everybody does. But if I say, hey, you really got to stop going to the French Laundry and then complaining about not being able to pay your bills. When you actually use the payee name and say, look, you went to the French Laundry and you spend $1,300 in French Laundry. When you use the payee name, it clicks a different part of the brain that makes it real, makes it official.
Yeah. So yeah, everyone listening, I wasn't saying, hey, Hector, I have a restaurant pay vendor. I was saying, oh, Hector, I have a restaurant vendor. Like this is kind of new to me. And I don't know where I might have learned that. There probably is some idea like, oh, I was trying to be efficient.
There are two schools of thoughts, and you could poll everybody here and as a bookkeeper and accountant. And it's probably going to be a split 50-50. 50 would say, no, don't clutter the vendor list, create a generic restaurant vendor. And the other 50% are going to be on my camp, or just newly bought into my idea based on my explanation just now that you should have a separate vendor name for it. And again, it has to do with reporting. I want to be able to see that in reports. And I want to tell the client, hey, you're spending a lot of money in Goodyear. Have you looked at Firestone? Right? Like if I say you spend a lot of money in tire company, well, that doesn't mean anything to them. I'm a transportation company. I spend money in tire company. But when you use the actual vendor name, it makes a difference.
Okay, everyone. Start the brawl on the chat.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we'd love to know what is your, and this goes for restaurants, gas stations, airlines, like the hotels. These are the ones that typically people fight over. Now, an exception to the rule is somebody went to France once, and they're never going to go to France again. And you got all these restaurants all these vendors that sound like French restaurants, right? You could just call it French restaurant. I'm probably okay with that, just because it's sort of one-off and it has to do with the particular travel. But generally speaking, I don't even want to think about it. Just because I can import them so easily, I don't worry about it anyway. Okay. Now it would be nice, and this is something that unfortunately it would be nice for me to have one more weapon in my arsenal, which is to say, hey, QuickBooks has a really cool vendor merging tool that if you got duplicates, you can quickly merge them together. That doesn't exist. If that existed, I would add that to it, right? But it doesn't exist. And I've been lobbying for a vendor merging tool for a long time, but I can't get anybody into it to even understand what I'm saying. But so it's a different issue altogether.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move to reports, and we're going to go back into QuickBooks here. And let's talk about tags. So probably one of the most powerful features that QuickBooks has right now for reporting is called tags. Now, what makes it really powerful is that it's available in all versions of QuickBooks Online. Simple Start Essentials plus Advanced across all versions. So you have to spend a whole lot of money to get really powerful tagging. The problem is, and this is a September 1st, 2021 statement, the problem is that tags is very limited in the output side on the reports. There's not that many reports that use tags. So it's really powerful on the input side. There's tons of places you can put it. You can use all versions of QuickBooks for it. However, the problem is it doesn't show up in that many reports. But what's powerful about tags is that it's not just tags, it's tag grouping. And tag grouping gives you the ability to have different tags for different contexts that are at odds with the same tag in the same group. So this could be useful to create menu of tags for categorizing transactions. So let me give you a couple of examples. Okay. So I'm going to go to start tagging transactions. Actually, not there. Let me go to create tag here on the right. It says new, and it gives you two options, tags or tag group. I'm going to do tag group, and then I'm going to call this country. Okay. I'm going to click on save. So I got a blue tag country. And then let's say I sell stuff from 3 countries. I sell in Canada, I sell in the US, and I sell in Mexico. Okay. And I'll have like a other option in there, right? So let's say, every once in a while I'll sell to a random country that's not on these 3. So now I can have basically a group of custom tags called country, easy to understand, easy to read, much easier than to use class or location, even though location might feel, because that's, I'm using physical locations, but again, it could add some confusion. The nice thing about tags is I can give it its own title. Okay. So I'm going to click on done. And then I'm going to click on another tag group, and I'm going to call this source. And I'm going to make this green. Click on save. So I'm going to put website, referral, and let's say magazine. Okay. So let's say I do 3 things. I got a website, I got other clients refer me clients, and I have ads in magazines, right? So this allows me to now have these custom tags in which I can take my transactions and tag them, right? So I'm going to create an invoice here. I'll pick a customer at random, and I'll pick let's just do a product here at random. And let's say this is $1,000. I go into my tags. Notice I got my green tags and my blue tags. So let's say this is a USA customer, and this one came from the website. Okay. So I'm going to click on save and new. And then I'll pick a different customer here. Okay. And let's say this was, say, $5,000. And then this was a Canada sale, and that came from the website. So I'm just going to like copy these and duplicate them to go a little faster. And it's like watching paint dry, right? So I know we're just doing transactions here. So, and let's make this 2,500, click on save. And I know you're starting to visualize what we're doing here, right? We have all this information about all these sales, and I want to know, where the sales are coming from. Okay, so we'll do 2 here, and I'll do 1 more. So we'll do a copy. Let's say this one came from the magazine, and this one is Mexico, and this one is, say, 1.5. Okay, so now I have enough data that I can now see it in the reports. So I'm going to close out of that. So all my transactions have tags in them. So I'm going to go into reports, and then here in the find menu, I'm going to type the word tag, and then we're going to have profit and loss by tag and transaction list by tag. Simplify it. Let's just do profit and loss by tag for now. And let's do this year. Click on run report. So I'm going to put here country. Click on run report. Okay, now they show up. Okay, so I run my profit and loss by tag report. I click on the display columns. I click country, and now they show up Canada, Mexico, US. You get to see my sales by tag. And then I look at, let's say, source, click on run report. And then I see how much business came from my website, referral sources, and magazine. Now, before tags were created, classes were what you would use to this. But classes is the single most powerful dimension feature inside QuickBooks Online and the only one in QuickBooks Desktop. So you want to save classes for the best. Whatever best dimension of data, most important dimension of data, most dominant dimension of data that you want to try to find in as many reports as possible, then you're going to save classes for that. And then locations has a different context, which I'll discuss in a second, but this gives you a general idea how tags could work. The other tag report here is the transaction list by tag, and that's just going to be more of a detailed report. And let's do group by, let's say, by country. And then we get to see all of my sales by country detailed, where I get to see the customer name, all that stuff, or I get to see them by source. Also a detailed type of report. And you can collapse them, which is pretty neat. So once you collapse them, you get sort of a quasi summary report. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to get rid of all the details. Okay, I'll leave name because name might be useful, right? Something like that. And then I just kind of get rid of all those, and then I collapse them, right? So I can get rid of more stuff, but you're trying to make a summary report of sales by tag. Okay, something you can already do with class, by the way, without having to do that much finagling. But it just gives you a general idea of just the 2 ways you can use tags, in a P&L or in a transaction list. Now, why is the P&L relevant? And I'll explain why. Let's just do a P&L by class again, and let's do it by, let's say let's do it by country. That might be easier. Is because if I have direct expenses to those sales, and I also want to put them in that country, I can see both sales and costs for that tag. So for example, I'm going to duplicate the tab here so I don't lose my report. And then I'm going to go back to a couple of my expenses. So I'll just grab a couple of expenses here at random. I'll pick this one up from Amazon, and I'll give it let's say a Mexico tag, and click on save. Oops, that popped up. Click on save. And then I'll pick another expense from my recent ones. We got Google Ads here. And then we can do, let's say, USA. Click on save. And then I'll pick another one. Let's say that one. And we make that one Canada. So I'm just kind of illustrating that you can have your expenses by tags as well. So when you run your P&L by tag, you essentially get a profit. you get the income, and you get the expense. So again, classes do this already. Locations do this already. Why would you use tags when you use class and locations? Well, number one, tags are available in Simple Start and Essentials.
Yeah.
Class and locations is not. So that's maybe the only reason why you're using tags instead of class and locations. My pet peeve with tags is the following. If I were to run a report like, let's do a profit and loss, let's do a sales by customer detail, okay? Report. So one that gives me all my sales. So let's do the entire year here, okay? One of my pet peeves with that is you run a report like this, you're like, okay, cool. I'll go to customize report, I'll go to filter, and then I'll find the tag here and filter the tag, not available. Okay. So kind of just a flaw that QuickBooks has is that they haven't added tags to all the reporting system, whereas you can filter the class itself. So if you got a particular class here, you can filter the class probably in almost all the reports, detail reports in QuickBooks. So that's my pet peeve is I cannot bring tags into other reports. It's limited to those two reports. Now, that might change, right? Next year, I'll do a webinar just like this, and I'll be criticizing something else that's wrong with QuickBooks, and they'll solve that. But for now, that's my pet peeve with tags. And that's why if I'm using Plus or Advanced and I have an important dimension of data that I want to be able to run in reports and filter, I want to have that available. So class and locations gives me that, tags does not. So good segue to then now switch over to talk about tags, classes and locations. If we go back into my little chart here, okay, notice that tags is available in all versions. Tags is available in some or limited reports. That's what that means. I just covered that. And tags is available in transaction header only. You cannot have more than one tag per transaction. You can have tags at the transaction line level. That's different than classes. Classes can be either the header, the entire transaction, or they could be line item levels, which I really, really like about classes. There's a limitation to 300 tags in total. So you can have 300 groups and tags or added together. So, which is plenty, by the way. It is plenty. That's really powerful about tags. Class and locations are limited to 40 in Plus, QuickBooks Online Plus, and it's unlimited in Advanced. Now, to compare specifically class and locations, they're almost the same throughout all of QuickBooks. They're available in virtually the same amount of reports, with the exception of balance sheet by. Balance sheet by classes doesn't exist. Balance sheet by tag doesn't exist. Balance sheet by custom field doesn't exist, but balance sheet by location does. So that look, if you have a dimension of data in which you want to have separate balance sheets for, location is the best choice. So you got multiple physical retail locations for multiple stores that are all run under one entity. Locations is perfect for that because it gives you a balance sheet by location. Whereas classes, well, you will never be able to do a balance sheet by class. But again, the flexibility is with classes, I can do transaction line. I'll show you that. The other cool thing about locations over classes is that if you're using locations, you can have custom sales forms. So you can have one template with a different logo and company name with location A versus location B, which you can't if you're not using locations. So that's another interesting little factoid about locations that is more than just reports. It's also the general flow of the software. You can do employees by location, like payroll, but you cannot do employees by class. So I didn't add that in there, but that's kind of an interesting one to think about. And with locations, particularly because you cannot do it by transaction line, locations is going to be limited to one location per transaction. Okay, so that's kind of the difference between the two. I will show you an illustration of the difference between transaction line level and transaction header. For some of you experienced users, you might already know about that, but let's just cover that anyway. So I'm going to go into my account and settings area. Okay, and in account and settings, I'm going to go into advanced, and I'm going to go into categories. And notice that my classes are turned on. And I have this little checkbox that says, is it one per transaction or is it one per row? I'm going to say this once, repeat it, and I want this to be drilled into your head forever. If you're going to use classes, take advantage and do classes at the row level. Don't ever use classes at the transaction level. As a matter of fact, I wish that option didn't even exist because it's a waste of a resource. Okay. So classes, do row level, period. If you are going to want something that it's header level, then use locations. Okay. There might be some cases in which classes for the header level will work, where you would go one per transaction, but for the most part, you don't want that. The other cool thing about classes is you can change the label. So you can call it business, department, division, store, property, territory. Sorry, that's about locations. I'm going to leave it in location to avoid confusion because unfortunately, QuickBooks will change the label of it in some places, but not in others. So make things really confusing where you're going to see the word location somewhere and the word, whatever, department somewhere else. So I leave it in location for now, just so I understand where it is when I'm looking at it in any dimension of reporting. So I'm going to click on save, and I turned on both classes and locations. Now I'm going to go back to that, close that out. Okay. And I'm going to go back into these are my sales as well. So I'm going to open up my sale here. And notice that I have up here my location. So my location could be, and we do have tags for country. Maybe this is the country we're selling to, but location could be maybe where I'm selling from, or the person inside the company, the partner inside the company, or whatever that's selling it. So you can have multiple ways of thinking about this. Let's just say we have a New York office and a Miami office, and we'll just simplify our world that way. So who's selling it? Is it the New York office or is it the Miami office? Okay. So we'll do something like this that will kind of give me an idea more or less, who's selling it. So the Miami office is selling this one. And in classes, I have here like my channel. So let's say this was a Shopify sale. Okay. So look at all these dimensions of data that we're managing. Like we're saying we bought, the source is the website. That's where the client came from. The country is like where I sold to. This is the individual location inside my business where that initiated the business, and class could be maybe the channel source or the revenue source that it came in. So now you have all sorts of data sources here beyond just the customer name, the item name, the account, the amount, where that you can build really rich reports. And this is all going to be garbage in, garbage out. So if I'm not putting the right stuff in, the reports are going to be wrong. So I'll do save, and then I'll just continue to show you. I'll pick this other one here, and we'll make this one and I'll just kind of change all of them so you kind of see the reports. So I'm going to do New York office, and then I'll do here, let's say wholesale. Okay. And then just completely forget about the tag that we have and the source. This has nothing to do with the class. Imagine these are two separate two separate pieces of data that are not linked together, right? They're completely independent and different. And what kind of things you can put here? Well, we can put like the job foreman, right? The sales rep, the salesperson in charge, maybe the county in which we're doing the work, because we want to do reports by county, because maybe the county offices forces me to do that, or maybe the state that I'm selling in, so I can cross-check my sales by state with my sales tax returns. Like that's the stuff you want to think about. There's all sorts of dimensions of information that we could possibly be using to do this, right? So now you saw me do this. So now what could I do with this information? Well, let's just start really simple. I'm going to go to reports, and then I'm going to type class, and then we'll do profit and loss by class. First one we can choose, profit and loss by class, and it's just a straight profit and loss report broken down by class. That's easy, right? Now, I only want to see, let's say, one class and one class only. Cool. I got a customized report. I go to filter, and I tell it I only want to see one of the. I don't want to see all the classes. I want to see one of the classes. I want to see just retail. Click on run report, and then there's my P&L just for my for that class. Okay. Or I could pick a specific set. I just want to look at retail and Shopify and compare those two together. Now, unfortunately, it does a running total at the end. I wish there was a way to turn that off. Actually, it should be a way to turn it off here, or is it? No, you can't. Yeah, so unfortunately, you can't turn off that last totaling one. It's just you might have to delete it manually in Excel, and maybe that's useful. But then you can then export this to Excel and do comparisons and see, what's the difference between this and that? What's the proportion? You can do all sorts of analysis with that once you have that data in there. Same thing with locations. I can do a P&L by location, and then you can see kind of like my sales by location. Okay, it looks like I didn't put anything on the New York office. Let's put this one in the New York office. So it looks a little bit better. Let's do New York office here. Save and close. And then we'll go back into our report. And then now we see a P&L by location. And you can use a reclassify tool to reclassify all classes and locations if you got them missing because you forgot to put them in the report as well. So again, in summary, class and locations, super powerful. Super powerful. Again,
I have a question.
Yes.
So as you're doing this seems to me like the business owner has to be the one to be handling all this data entry.
Right. So your perspective is a bookkeeper's perspective, right? So
yeah.
So good point. Generally, when I do training, I look at everything from a business owner's perspective.
Okay.
I honestly, at the end of the day, I really don't care what the accountant or bookkeeper wants or don't want because they are disposable. Okay. So accountants and bookkeepers are not important to a business. This information is important to a business. Accountant and bookkeepers just help the business owner get there. Right. So my perspective is always from the business owner's perspective. And because I am more of an advisor than an accountant, I always sit next to the business owner and look at it from that perspective. Now, telling you this from a bookkeeper and accountant perspective, because I do accounting and bookkeeping for a living, this is very expensive to have the responsibility to do, because how in the world are you going to know what's Canada or Mexico or website? That this stuff is like virtually impossible to know. You have to stop and ask every single one. So like from an accounting perspective, from an accountant or accounting service perspective, it's just a very negative relation. It's a very negative just interaction because your customer is going to get tired of being asked what every transaction is. For them, it's going to be easier to just do it themselves. But that's going to require then for you to collaborate and work together and tell the user, okay, you're going to do e-invoices. You take care of class, tracking, tag, location. I'll reconcile the bank. I'll match the payments, right? And you have to have a real strict separation to, okay, who does what? And what's my role when these things are missing? Or what's my role when these things are wrong? Or what do I do when I give you some advice about this stuff, but garbage in, garbage out? My advice was garbage because what you entered was garbage. So yeah, it gets really complex and it does go a lot beyond what the average bookkeeper does or can do or should do for that matter. So this is training. This is where we add value to our clients by training them and showing them how to do this and selling them on the idea that they'll make better decisions, faster decisions by doing this. So you got to decide which lane you're going to be in.
Yeah. I'm thinking it's probably like a lot of short-term pain for a lot of long-term gain. So maybe those first 3 months of your try, you'll sit down, you have a session, you maybe outline, okay, these are the 3 locations and these are the 6 tags we need. And like, I know your business and we're moving to this.
Yeah.
And then
it's actually an inverse effect. It's a real big pain in the butt, really short-term pain at the beginning with very little reward. Right. Because you have to go back and reclassify past transactions for the stuff to even be valuable. Right. Now, assuming that you're starting from scratch, different story. But most of the times when someone has a bright idea of using tags, classes, and locations, it includes stuff from the past. It's just contextually, it includes stuff from the past. So there's a lot of pain at the beginning, and the reports you're seeing are always incomplete because you haven't finished. So it's a very big pain at the beginning with no reward. And then it basically essentially tilts, long run. So you have to sell it that way and set the expectation for that.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to move to the last thing, which is custom fields. We don't have that much time for it. I don't see a whole lot of questions in here.
I'm watching.
So I think that, so if you do want to throw your question in there, go ahead and throw it in. I'm going to show you essentially what is going to be in the near future my favorite feature of QuickBooks.
Oh my.
Okay. It's when I say it's going to be in the future because the reporting is not 100% there where I want it, but the infrastructure for it is it's there. So we're going to click on the gear menu. We're going to click on custom fields, and this is going to be available only in the advanced edition of QuickBooks. There are custom fields in Essentials, Simple Start Plus. There are some custom fields in there, but they don't behave this way at all. They're just blank boxes for you to type things in there. These custom fields are really, really useful. They're really, really sexy, really, really important. And if you do it well, the output you get out of it is really awesome. Okay, especially with the new custom graphing tools and the custom reporting tools are coming out in the next couple of months. That's going to be incredible. So think of the custom field think of it the same as the tags, where you pick the title and then pick what goes in the drop-down menu. But tags are available across every aspect of QuickBooks. So unfortunately, you're going to have tags that are irrelevant to purchase orders or irrelevant to bills or relevant to estimates, and they're still going to be there. So with tags, you can choose what goes in what form. With this custom fields, you choose which fields go in which forms, right? So let's say, for example, I want to have a field for having the name of the person that authorized a specific expense. This is just an idea. These are custom, so your imagination can run wild on these. So we're going to go to add field, and we're going to call it authorized by, okay? So the expense was authorized by a particular person. And we're going to do a drop-down list. And let's say there's 3 people that authorize. There's Hector, there's Alex, and there's Mary. So 3 people potentially authorized. And maybe in the future, I want to see expenses based on who authorized them. And I want to say this is only going to be a transaction type of custom field. It's only going to be in transactions, and it's only going to be in a bill, in an expense, or in a check. Just an idea, right? So only in these 3 contexts, right? Bill, expense, and check, this custom field will show up, okay? So then I click on save, and then the custom field exists. So if I go create an invoice, okay, there's no custom field for authorized by. There's other custom fields I created, like sales rep and project manager, right? Those are examples of custom field. But in this particular one I showed you that I started with, it's only for expenses. So here in tags, notice that tags are going to be everywhere, every transaction. So I contain all the tags. And again, it could confuse the user. As you mentioned earlier, Kate, the end user, not the sophisticated accounting bookkeeper user, the end user, the small business owner, the employee, the small business owner is going to have the brunt of having to enter all these things. The easier you make it for them, the more probable, and I can say improbable because it's probably not going to happen, the more probable that they'll enter it right or not forget to enter it, right? The more confusing you put it, the more probability that they'll enter it wrong or omit it completely, okay? So,
they have to call you before they make too big of a mess, though.
right. And unfortunately, there's not like really great cleanup tools for reclassifying custom fields.
Okay.
So unfortunately, if they're entering these things wrong, you're going to have to manually go in each of these and change them. So until we get a tool like that, you got to really be careful about how you do it. So what I like about custom fields is that I can decide where they go. See that? So I can have, somebody create a bill for supplies. Let's say this is $500, and then we can, that's been authorized by Hector. So once you go in there and you see it's been authorized by Hector, then you're ready to pay it, right? Something like that, right? And then you can run your report based on, who's authorized which bill. Let's do save and close here. And then I'm going to go back here for a minute and go back to my custom fields. I'm going to edit authorized by, and I'm going to put here pending. Okay. So I'm creating one more field in there for pending. And again, I like drop-down menus because it doesn't give the person an option to screw things up. You got to choose from one of the options that is there. You can cheat. You can still pick the wrong thing, but you have a lot less probability of doing it. So let's say we have this other bill, and this one is pending to be authorized to be paid. And let's say, and I'm choosing just random amounts here and doing this, and then I'll do save a new, and then I'll pick another bill here. See Adobe, and let's say this one's authorized by Mary. And then we'll put here supplies. This will be that amount. So save. So now what would I do with this kind of information? Well, I'm going to go into reports and I can do, and bear with me on this. Sometimes it's hard to remember where these custom fields are in reports. So I'm going to do transaction list by account for now. And I'm going to guess that it's in here. Let's see. Let's see group by, and it's not here. See, it's one of those things that just drives me flipping crazy, remembering where these things are. So let's do bills. Let's do unpaid bills. And let's say if these are available in the filters, they're here, authorized by. So I can choose and say, okay, give me all the unpaid bills that are authorized by Hector. And you run the report and only shows you the bills that have already been authorized by Hector. So you're catching it here. So kind of see what the dynamic here is, that I can use a custom. Again, if I'm able to remember where these things are supposed to, where these filters are available, right? Because you kind of have to remember these and write them down. And I am building a database for that, which I'll show you in a second. The database of where the fields are located in which reports. It's still a work in progress, but it's just really, really interesting for you to now think about, when your client ever asks you, or you're the business owner, and say, look, I want to be able to group my information or see it in different ways. Are there other ways to do this? Let's do, because I know I can do sales by customer detail, and I think I can do custom fields in here. Yes, I can. So I can do this by sales rep, for example, and click on run report. I haven't shown you sales rep, but I'll show you that in a second. So I have a couple of sales from Bob, a couple of sales from Mike. I'm going to collapse them just so you can see. And then here's information, right? So I have all my sales that were from Mike and all the sales that were from Bob. So in a sales detail report, I can group them or list them by sales rep. And that was a custom field I created. I'm showing you an actual example where I limited, the options here in the drop-down menu. Okay. So that's probably as much as custom fields as I can cover. I'm going to do a webinar in November where I'm going to go like super over deep into these things. I'm going to do 3 hours worth of like just custom reports, but that just gives you an idea of again, just want to get the kind of the hamster wheel going in all the ways you can think of creating custom ways to record information to then get the output out of it. And the last thing is, I know we're over time here, but we still have an audience. So if there's an audience, I'll be speaking. Okay, that's just a rule of thumb of knowing me. There's an audience, my mouth is going to be running. Okay, so I'm going to go to reports, and then I'm going to go to performance center, and just kind of show you what you can do with this. This is only available in advance, and then we go into new chart, add a new chart, and let's say I want to look at revenue by class. It's just an example. So I'm going to go here into revenue, click on continue, and then I want to call this revenue by class. And I'm going to look at, let's say, this fiscal year to last month or something like that. And then I'm going to have a quick graph of all my sales for all the classes, but then I can group them and say, look, show me my retail sales versus my, let's do Shopify versus wholesale, right? Something like that. And then now you have a report that kind of shows you your just limiting to, again, limiting it to Shopify and wholesale, and maybe just bring retail into the mix here, into that class. Remember, classes. So you can do this by class. You can do this by location. You can do it by particular product. You can do it by income category. You can do it by customer. You can do it by projects. So it's really, really neat type of stuff you can do. And you can also filter it and to say, look, let's do that graph, but I only want to see if they were from the Miami office. And then you get the same report. Let's just do this month. This month might give me better information. So we get essentially the same report. Right? It hasn't populated yet, but we kind of have to have really good data to be able to illustrate this. But it just gives you an example, an idea of how you can run the filter for a location. For example, let me do this here. You can filter by location, but then the graph by the class, or the other way, graph by the location, filter by the class. Again, another pet peeve of mine on the graphs, just like the tags and the custom report builder, they do get delayed. It takes a while for them to feed into this site, so you don't get to immediately see it. But they're working on making this real time, but it's just not available yet.
Can you do any of these dashboards by the custom fields?
So no, not available in custom fields yet. I think remember when I said custom fields are about to be my favorite thing in QuickBooks.
Right.
Yet.
Okay.
This is one of the reasons why it's not. Okay. So right now, officially, the most powerful dimensions of data in QuickBooks are classes and locations, because they're available here. They're available in most reports to filter. Tags are cool. They're awesome, but they're very limitedly available. There's no tagging here. And custom fields, again, you notice I try to run a normal report and it wasn't there. So it's one of those things that, again, tags and custom fields are new for this year, and it might take another 6 months until it propagates throughout all things QuickBooks. For now, it is really important to you to have dimensions of data. Classes and locations should be your first go-to.
What about, so Nancy's asking if custom fields can be required, and I'm wondering the same thing about tags.
No, they can't. They can't.
Like if they made it that way, then you as the advisor, you go in, you do this huge setup, you get them set up so the data is going to have, you're going to have the ability to have the data that you need to run these reports. But if you don't prevent them from saving stuff that's not tagged properly, then like, what's the point? Like, how are you going to be able to like hover over every transaction? But if you could make it where they can't say save, then that admin person who's doing it knows like something's wrong. I better get out the manual that Hector built or that Kate built.
So some of the things that are missing in this custom fields advanced world is, one, a custom field that is required, like you say, require it. Make sure you put something. A default option, like for example, making pending the default one. So if you require it and you still forget to put something, at least it goes into like a default catch-all one.
Right.
That would be nice. Or so if you can not require it, but then put like have a default one that says needs to be added or something like that, then at least you can run a report to see what's missing, right? Because requiring it doesn't mean it's going to be done correctly. But yes, so we're missing a default setting. We're missing a required setting. We're missing in many reports, as we mentioned earlier. And the other thing that's missing is having a user permission structure where certain users can change this data and some can't. Because it'll be interesting to have someone just entering bills, but not putting who authorized something, having maybe just Hector be able to authorize its own things. So we're also missing the ability to restrict which users have access to which fields, which will, again, it will allow what you're saying, build this robust system in place with a bunch of controls. We're not there yet, and we're probably really far away from that. But But your assessment of this or where this could go, that's why I said it's about to be my favorite feature. It won't be until they finish it. And again, they might not even be looking at any of these things. Or I might sit with someone for 3 hours and explain it to them, and it might just go over their head and go, I have no idea what this is. And no one's ever given me this feedback. So therefore, I'm not even going to look into that. So who knows how this is going to go? One thing I tell you, I'm tirelessly, while I'm still a QuickBooks advocate, I'm tirelessly looking for people to speak to tell them about all these things.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think we can wrap it up. So the last slide here has a link of 6 videos. Every single thing we talked about today, there's a 20 to maybe 50-minute video expanding in depth. So if you liked any of these topics, maybe we didn't cover it deep enough, maybe this recording was too short, and you have links there to all of them. So if you download the slides, that's there. And lastly, if you ever want to subscribe to my advanced content, these are my classes that I charge for. And I go in pretty in depth on the stuff that I charge for. I have a subscription for $50 a month. You have access to all my QuickBooks Online content. And there's a coupon code to get $25 off lifetime of the subscription. This is my YouTube channel and my email. I'd like to thank Kate again for helping me. So I do the webinars alone most of the time. it's really awesome to have someone kind of like to go back and forth and being asked questions.
Thank you for asking me to be here.
Thank you, everybody. Have
All
a
right,
wonderful
adios.
day.
Bye.
Bye.